You are listening to part 70 of our series, 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan, and welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Hi, Gemini. Did you think much about anabolic steroids or corticosteroids this week?
Only to the extent that, you can tell when people take them, and that's not something that I would ever be interested in or hope my sons would never take to make themselves bulkier or anything like that as far as weightlifting goes.
So when you say that you can tell, in what way can you tell? I'm not questioning you. I'm just interested.
This seems to me like, especially in men, when you see, to me, they look like they're on steroids, especially when they have larger, more defined upper bodies than they do like from the waist down. Like their legs might be really thin. It's just like this look that they have that makes you wonder, like, are they on steroids? Like really thick necks and all that, more than
really
just
thick
who
necks,
out.
Right? Remember, the corticosteroids put fat on the neck.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So.
Right. So you're right. You're picking up on that subtle sign. And I keep dairy guts, and one of the things I don't keep is a billy goat, because billy goats, when they get a rush of testosterone, are just about unstoppable. And one of the first things that happens when they start to come into season is their neck swells up.
Oh, I didn't know
you
that.
get the occasional person who doesn't know this and has too tight a collar on their billy goat, and the goat actually chokes to death.
Oh, my.
Because its neck swells so incredibly. I once saw a mature billy goat pull two men. Total combined weight of these two men was over 500 pounds, pulling them face down through the mud of a field.
Wow.
They were trying to stop him. That's what's called roid rage.
Yes.
Right, what that billy goat was experiencing, because I had taken my doe over, and he had bred my doe, and all was well, and we said, thank you very much, and we left, and he was not happy about that. And those two men who were trying to tie him back up in his stall were, as I said, just dragged around with a massive amount of testosterone pumping through that goat's body. All right. So what anabolic steroids actually do is they cause the muscles to synthesize more protein. And that's that bulky thing that you're talking about. However, there are side effects. There's no short-term side effects, and that's pretty interesting. Remember, there are short-term side effects with the corticosteroids. But with the anabolic steroids, there aren't short-term side effects on the brain. There's no high. There's no really, you don't get addicted to steroids the way you might to other things. But your body can become habituated to them. And they can, especially over long term, affect the brain's production and use of dopamine, serotonin, and opioids. And that is really going to change your mood because, again, steroids are hormones. These are hormones. We don't just go in there and pick and choose. We're going to change this hormone, and we're going to change it a little bit. Once we start working with corticosteroids or anabolic steroids, we are messing with all of the hormones in our bodies. And the hormones are the general managers. They're really instructing our immune system and many of our systems exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Because of this, there are some myths among the men who are using steroids that it's safer if you cycle off and on with the steroids. There's not a lot of scientific evidence that that's true, but to me it makes a lot of sense that if what the medical profession is telling me about using corticosteroids is to use the smallest dose possible and to skip days, that perhaps doing the same thing with anabolic steroids would be the smart way to go. Some of the people who are using anabolic steroids think that stacking is a way to get more effect but take less of the drug. It's kind of like, I've read that some women use 2 or 3 face creams and that they use them all at the same time because they believe that each one has a certain special thing and that they work better together, and this is stacking. So this is what they're doing with steroids, or pyramiding, which is slowly increasing your dose of your anabolic steroid until you get to as high as your body can tolerate and then dropping gradually back off. So let's look at some of the side effects of anabolic steroids. The ABC News medical unit went out and interviewed medical specialists and then spent some time at the National Institute on Drug Abuse and prepared this list for us. The potential side effects of steroid use, especially anabolic steroid use, but all steroid use, include masculinization when increased testosterone is taken, and that causes mostly irreversible side effects in women, including increased facial hair, male pattern baldness, increased acne, changes in skin texture, growth of body hair, and increased aggressiveness and irritability. The opposite, however, happens to men. Feminization occurs in men as the excess testosterone is converted into estrogen. So again, I want to highlight this. Hormones don't stay put in your body. They are the original shapeshifters. The fact that we ingest one hormone or have one hormone ingested in it doesn't mean that our body is just going to leave it alone and let it be that. So when women take anabolic steroids, when they take testosterone, that level of testosterone is utilized by their body, and they become more typically male. However, when men take that added testosterone, their bodies cannot utilize it. And so they aromatize it, which means they turn it into estrogen. And one of the things that you were talking about, Gemini, was that upper body strength, that the pectoral muscles grow so much it almost looks like the men have breasts. And in fact, there is a swelling there from the estrogen that is now circulating in their body. Sperm count and libido decrease. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can find this from one site. I thought that this was quite interesting. It says, when you're taking anabolic steroids, there will be these side effects, and they talk about many of the side effects I'm talking about. But there are 2 that aren't often discussed, and they are guaranteed. Most anabolic steroids are going to suppress natural testosterone production, and that means your testicles are going to atrophy. You need to take some testosterone while you're taking anabolic steroids so that your body has enough of this for proper function. No, it won't prevent your testicles from atrophying, but you'll have testosterone that you need for proper functioning. And when you stop taking steroids, your testicles will return to normal. Breasts appear, sperm count and libido decrease, testes shrink, impotence sets in, and the muscles soften. These side effects are often reversible. Cardiovascular health is damaged by steroids, which increase both blood pressure and bad cholesterol. Growth defects, especially among teenage boys, can be caused by steroids. Teenage boys believe or are told that steroids will make them more masculine, make them more muscular, make them stronger, but in fact what they do is to stunt their growth, to cause a shutdown of the growth plates in the bones, and to leave them permanently smaller. Kidney problems arise because taking steroids causes the electrolytes to become whacked out. That's why the blood pressure rises, and it's also why the ankles and legs swell, and that can contribute to lower back pain and, of course, confused mentation. When you don't have the right minerals in your body, then you are not going to be thinking straight. Liver problems, including cancer and liver damage, can occur with the use of oral steroids, but they are regarded as rare. However, if you inject steroids, especially if you're not doing it in a sterile doctor's office, then the risk of hepatitis and HIV is there. For health reasons surrounding the liver, you are best served by avoiding oral steroids, say most of the sites that are selling illegal steroids. Skin, the largest organ of the body, is the most sensitive organ to steroids, especially in women. With consistent use of steroids, the pores grow larger and acne problems spread out. They are not aided by typical over-the-counter medications. Stretch marks become prominent. They're not caused by the steroids, but if you have any stretch marks, you're really going to see them. The neuropsychiatric side effects of steroids have been well studied by two prominent Harvard psychiatrists, Dr. Harrison Pope and Dr. Kurt Brower. The primary neuropsychiatric side effect is a mania, and that mania builds. It's a very similar mania to someone who is bipolar, going through their manic state. The mania becomes more and more active, the person less and less able to be still. There is aggressiveness, recklessness, and a very diminished need for sleep. Eventually, as we said, this becomes roid rage, and in fact, there are some sites who talk about how much steroids you have to take to get into this state, because that's what will make you work out harder and be more aggressive in the competitions. Just as with bipolar disorder, this mania is almost always followed by a profound depression, which can actually lead to suicide. Long-term abuse thus mimics bipolar disorder. There is a suspected psychologically addictive aspect to steroid use, not because the steroids actually cause a physiological addiction, but because they cause a psychological addiction. And it's somewhat similar to the addiction that women get into when they are dealing with anorexia or bulimia. When we have a dysmorphic view of our own body, then what we see does not jive with health. We have an unhealthy view of how our body should look. And in using deprivation of food or hormones to try to change our bodies, for women making their bodies very small and for men making their bodies very large, a real dimorphism there, we injure our health profoundly. Anabolic steroids lead to paranoia. Anabolic steroids lead to delusions, impaired judgment, and extreme mood swings. if you're dealing with somebody who is exhibiting these kinds of behavior, you might want to ask if they are actually taking steroids. Again, remember the story I told you about my friend who needed steroids because she was reacting so badly to the chemotherapy and went in to a total delusional state, was running up and down the streets, was quite, disturbed mentally by that. But she herself, as is frequently the case in a delusional state, didn't understand what was going on until after the fact. Taking anabolic steroids can cause permanent health problems, including kidney failure, liver damage, enlarged heart, atherosclerosis, increased risk of stroke and heart attack even in young people, and skin problems. If you take steroids, there can be addiction, but it's primarily a psychological addiction unless you have been using opioids along with your steroids, and some stackers do indeed use opioids or opiates, painkillers, so that they can work out harder and work out longer. These opioids, of course, also really distort brain chemicals, just as the steroids do, and makes withdrawing from them pretty difficult. Mood swings, fatigue, but an inability to sleep, sleeplessness, restlessness, feeling exhausted but not being able to go to sleep, loss of appetite, decreased sex drive, headaches, muscle and joint pain, intense cravings, but again, the inability to fulfill those cravings, not knowing what you crave or getting what you crave and then finding it disgusting, and a deep inertia about your life. The primary drugs that are used to treat the withdrawal symptoms from the anabolic steroids are antidepressants, opioids, and more hormones. And when I read these things, I say to myself, how interesting. How interesting that what we choose to do for someone who has been led into believing that using these hormones will get them what they want, that rather than show them how to live a healthy life and how to eat well and how to take care of themselves, that we give them other drugs, that we just replace the drugs they've been taking with other drugs. The most common anabolic steroids are many, many, many forms of testosterone. Decadurabolin, an extremely popular anabolic steroid, which is derived from progesterone. Durabolin, Winstrol, Anadrol, which is an immensely powerful dihydrotestosterone, which is used by many professional players off seasons where it's not going to show up. In fact, many sites said that the decadurabolin, along with testosterone, will do wonders for almost any man. Of course, you have to be over 30. But remember that when the researchers set out across the United States to find the normal amount of testosterone, testing thousands of men all across North America, U.S. and Canada, to discover normal testosterone, what they found was that there is no normal level of testosterone. There were very healthy men with low testosterone who were fertile and had fathered children. There were healthy men with high levels of testosterone who hadn't fathered children, who had erectile dysfunction. So basically, in order to have a standard so that doctors could do a blood test or saliva test and tell men they were low in testosterone, they simply picked a number. I believe, in fact, that men are probably not low in testosterone any more than women are low in estrogen. But that this is somewhat, equal opportunity foisting off of hormones on both men and women as they hit the stage of life where suddenly they must admit they're not 20 anymore. All steroidal hormones are lipid soluble. That is, they diffuse directly into the cells of the body. They don't have to bind to a receptor site. Once the steroids diffuse into the cell, they can influence gene transcription and thus influence the proteins that the cell is producing. Different kinds of steroid hormones can cause cells to produce different kinds of proteins. Testosterone and its derivatives primarily increase the production of actin and myosin in skeletal muscle, and these are proteins that make the muscle stronger. But before the steroid can get to the cells, it has to get into the blood. That's why so many bodybuilders prefer injections and transdermal gels, because anything that's in the blood has to go through the liver. Most testosterone that's present in the body is already bound to proteins like albumin and SHBG in the blood. Only free testosterone can actually diffuse into the cells. So what we're talking about is not just testosterone, but all hormones, that the hormones are present in two states in our body, bound to proteins in our blood and free. And it's the free hormones that can actively move around, and enzymes that are created by the body can bind and unbind hormones. Bodies produce more or less binding proteins to keep the rate of testosterone at the right level for your body. Your body can't just make more albumin, because if it does, then the fluid concentrations between your cells and your extracellular fluids would go totally wanky. And you can't ratchet up the SHBG levels when you introduce anabolic steroids, because SHBG is just going to bind to more testosterone. In fact, it's this exact thing that causes women to experience a loss of sexual interest when they're on birth control, because testosterone is, of course, known as the hormone of desire. And women do not have a lot of testosterone when they take progesterone, birth control pills. That progesterone can be turned into the body into a binder or a bound form of testosterone, which then actually kind of is envisioned as sucking up the testosterone that is available in the blood. The bodybuilders talk about how you cannot outrun binding proteins. And this is one of the reasons for stacking, because you can take other drugs that help you get around these things. But let's keep some of the things that we have learned in mind as we move toward the last half of this month and the last two shows of this month, in which we're going to really focus in very strongly on these hormones in plants, these steroids, sterols in plants. So one thing that we have learned is that the steroids don't have sharp boundaries. They are lipids, and like all fats, they move around. So even if we think we're taking one kind of hormone, it can pretty easily turn into something else in the body. We have learned that steroids and hormones don't have to fit into a receptor cell. They can just diffuse right into the cells of the body, and that, in fact, the liver is burdened by having to deal with drug-like or drug steroids. We're going to look and see whether the same is true of natural steroids. Are natural steroids going to have an impact on the liver? In general, we think of natural things as not having the same side effects as synthetic things. Is this going to be true about the plants that could be used instead of these sterols? And we're going to bring to mind the fact that fat in the diet is very important if we want to have healthy hormones, and not just any fat. One of the kind of quick tricks that I learned for women who are having fertility problems is to suggest that they eat animal fat at every single meal, or at least 3 times a day. And that's because animal fat, of course, is a superb source of cholesterol. And cholesterol is the building block of all other hormones. So rather than suggest that a woman take a specific hormone or a specific plant to bring up a specific hormone to increase fertility, I suggest that the woman provide herself with the raw materials that her body needs to make the hormones that she is going to think about. And that's the last point we want to remember, is that thinking about taking hormones has a very, very strong effect on us. It has one of the strongest responses to placebos known. I'm going to make a case for plants really actually having hormonal effects in the body. We're going to talk about how that happens. But even if it wasn't true, if we believed it to be true, it would be. The placebo effect, when it comes to steroids, to hormones, to those shapeshifters in our bodies, is that powerful and that effective. And so we'll also be looking at some ways that we can trigger the placebo response in ourselves. Ted Kapchuk at Harvard University is currently doing some fascinating research with telling people that they are receiving a placebo and showing them how they can actually nonetheless use that placebo to cause actual physical changes in their bodies, to turn off pain, to get stronger, to do the kinds of things that we're looking for these corticosteroids and anabolic steroids to do for us. Thanks so much for giving me this time and this space, Gemini. It's a real treasure to be able to come here and to talk about all the things that I'm learning and all of the things that I'm doing, and to share green blessings with everyone. It's my goal, as you know, to restore herbal medicine as people's medicine, and to remind us all that there are green blessings right outside our doors. Good night, Gemini.
Thank you, Susan. It's always our pleasure to have you here at Time Monk Radio. And this concludes part 70 of our series, The 7 Medicines the Wise Woman Way, with Susan Wade at Time Monk Radio.